So, a very good morning, good day, good evening to everyone, wherever you are joining us from. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Stats Cafe on harnessing time use data for evidence based policy and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I am Sharita Sarao, statistician with the ESCAP Statistics Division. And joining us today are some outstanding speakers from national statistical offices in the Asia Pacific region, as well as from international agencies with extensive experience in supporting the production as well as the analysis of data. Now, understanding how people allocate and use their time can provide crucial insights on a range of policy priorities to the 2030 agenda. And in particular, on SDG 5, uh, which is basically about achieving gender equality, which contains a target on recognizing and valuing unpaid domestic and care work. Now, typically, as we know, time use data has been used to basically understand the unpaid work contributions of women and men, and also to provide insight on a range of gender policy issues. For instance, in understanding the constraints faced by women in labor market participation, as well as the availability of affordable care services, both in terms of childcare as well as the elderly, in understanding the concept of time poverty, and overall to understand the contribution of unpaid work to the national economy. Because historically, many of the tasks that are carried out within households for daily survival and well being have actually been invisible in economic models as well as in policy discussions. At the same time, researchers have also been using and exploring time use data sets to analyze issues beyond gender equality. And very often they are doing this in combination with data from other surveys and sources. For instance, to understand the health and well-being patterns of the general population, to understand access to clean energy, water, and sanitation, as well as for transport planning, all based on time use patterns of population groups. So as we understand, what we're trying to say here is that time use surveys are not necessarily the primary source of data for all of these issues that I just mentioned, but when used in combination with other data sources, they can help to make the analysis much more robust and comprehensive. And all of this becomes extremely relevant in terms of the new and emerging data demands of the 2030 agenda. So that said, in the Asia Pacific region, our research shows that about 30 countries have actually conducted time use data collection exercises over the years, but not particularly very systematically or regularly. And where data sets are available, most often these have been very much underutilized for policy purposes. So on the one hand, we have the issue of perhaps the lack of awareness of the policy applications of time use data. And on the other hand, we have persisting challenges related to implementation of existing methodologies and standards, including the updated international classifications. So with this in mind, this Stats Cafe is basically organized in two parts. In the first part, we will listen to 3 presentations on data collection approaches and methods, including in the context of COVID-19. And in the second part, we will listen to 2 case studies demonstrating the analysis and use of national time use data for gender-sensitive policy advocacy. So just before we make a start, I would also like to take this opportunity to mention that this Stats Cafe coincides with the recent release of an ESCAP publication on time use data analysis. This publication compiles a set of research studies by preeminent experts demonstrating some policy applications of time use data from various countries. Some of you may have already seen this publication, but let's take a look at this very short video highlighting some of the key features of this publication. So over to you, Pim, for the video, please. So we hope that you will all be able to access this video, you find it a useful guide and also a source of inspiration, not just for better utilization of existing data sets in your countries, but also to step up production. So without further ado, let's move now into part one of our Stats Cafe on data production approaches and methods. And just a quick reminder that all participants are requested to keep your microphones and cameras switched off during the session unless you are speaking. We will have a Q&A session at the end of all presentations, but you're invited to put in your questions in the chat box at any time during the session. And the session will be recorded for the benefit of those who are unable to join us for this session today. So may I now invite our first speaker, Ms. Cecilia Tinonen. Cecilia is statistician and time use survey specialist based in the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. She's responsible for developing the program of work on time use methods as part of UN Women's flagship program initiative on gender statistics called Women Count. And she was also previously the project technical officer with the Department of Statistics of the ILO. So Cecilia will be talking to us about, she will provide us basically an overview of time use statistics, their relevance, and data collection methods. She's joining us from Italy this morning, so very early in the day for her. Thanks, Cecilia, for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Sharita, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. I would like to start from a very basic definition of what are time use surveys. So time use surveys are sometimes called time budget surveys, and they aim to provide information on the activities that people perform over a given time period, generally a day, or it could also be a week, as well as how much time they spend on each of these different specified activities. Historically, the analytical objectives for collecting time use data revolved around three major themes. Number one, the measurement of unpaid domestic and care work. Time use surveys are indeed the main household surveys, specialized household survey, the main statistical source to produce data on the unpaid provision of services to the household and family members. Therefore, are the main statistical source to generate the indicator, the SCG indicator 5.4.1, which measures the proportion of time in a day spent on the unpaid provision of services to the household and family members. However, this time use survey play a crucial role, not just for international commitment, but also for instance, constructing satellite account of household production, informing policies on caregiving services, as well as enhancing women economic empowerment. So the main emphasis here has been on increasing visibility of women's work through better statistics on their contribution to society and economy. The second theme, which my colleague Samantha from the ILO will discuss further, is to generate estimate on gender gaps in time spent on total workload. Time use data can indeed provide data to generate indicators on the amount of time spent on both paid and unpaid work, and look at the gender gaps of this distribution. The third thematic area, which is extremely important to keep in mind because it sheds light on indicators that measure the quality of life. And when we speak about quality of life, we have to look into spheres such as, for instance, time spent on leisure activities, time spent of self-care, time spent, for instance, on cultural activities. And why this is important? Because there is this preconception that time use data are data that only provide information on unpaid domestic and care work, but actually they can serve a wide variety of different policy uses, including, for instance, public health policies. There are different types of time use measurement. The collection of time use data can take place through an independent time use survey, which is an household survey concerned with a single subject of time use. That means that all statistical processes are designed and configured for this one purpose only. However, we can also conduct time use measurement in a multi-purpose household survey, for instance, LS Living Standard Measurement Survey, or household budget survey, or for instance, an LFS, a labor force survey. And when we look into attaching or integrating a time use component, we have two different approaches. One is the modular approach, where the time use component is a separate module attached to the parent survey. And then we have the integrated approach, which is less likely in official statistics, because basically includes few questions that are very specific to the topic of the survey, which are integrated into the main instrument. In terms of main data collection tools, currently we can identify two different methods: diary-based methods and stylized retrospective questions. Within the diary-based methods, we can identify the full Timeuse diary and a light Timeuse diary. In the full Timeuse diary, the respondent reports each activity in a sequential and chronological order from the time of usually waking up, including the time an activity began and ended, through the 24 hours of the day. In the light Timeuse diary, there is a pre-coded list of activities. It's a comprehensive and exhaustive list of activities. The recommendation from the UN is about 30 activities. And for these activities, the respondent indicates whether he participated in these activities, so whether he or she undertook these activities during the reference period, which is usually 24 hours, and whether, and if so, the respondent reports the time allocated to those activities. On the other hand, we have the stylized retrospective questions. An example sounds like, how many hours in the last 7 days did you spend on caring for children? Here, the reference period is not necessarily 24 hours. It could be, for instance, a calendar week. The reporting of activities is not arranged in a sequential or chronological manner. And it does, therefore, also not allow to analyze at what time of the day the population or subgroups of the population undertook the activities, as it is not in a diary-based format. The literature and also the UN recommendation so far has been that diary-based methods are the golden standard in terms of accuracy and precision of estimates, as stylized retrospective questions suffer from measurement error, in particular moderate to high recall bias or social desirability bias. However, the conduction of time use diary can be somewhat complex, and country practices has showed a very high heterogeneity in the administration of time use diary. So there is not one single design that is consistently applied throughout the time use data available worldwide. So with consequences on the interruption of, for instance, time series. And also data gaps are definitely severe in Asia-Pacific, Africa, and Arab states. So the expert group meeting that is currently working on revising the guidelines and standard for time use statistics is actually looking at solution to modernize time use data collection in line with ICATUS 2016 and the SDG framework. ICATUS is the international classification for activities on time use statistics, which has been recently adopted by the Statistical Commission in 2016. The areas of work of the expert group are 5. The first one is to make the case for time use data. As Sharita has highlighted and underlined, time use data can indeed inform several SDGs, not just SDG 5. So, for instance, can improve our understanding of time poverty alongside monetary poverty, can make us understand better dropout of girls and boys from schools due to time spent on unpaid domestic and care work, and can, for instance, inform public health policies or infrastructure development. The EG is promoting consistent concept and definition through the development of a glossary, ensuring high quality data, and is really looking into modernizing the time use collection of and supporting countries in applying latest technologies for the measurement of time use. And in this regard, has been looking also at developing a minimum harmonized instrument that looks at a hybrid approach between time use diary and stylized retrospective questions that can support the development of a system of data collection methods to measure a certain set of indicators, among which there is SDG 5.4.1. Obviously, COVID hit, and therefore the work of the EG has been focusing on measuring time use during crisis, and recent guidelines will be discussed at the next Statistical Commission on a minimum harmonized instrument to be administered during crisis. Will be also promoted through digitalization, so through, for instance, CAPI or CATI surveys. And there's going to be a strong component on data quality to be able to provide guidance on how to interpret and how to administer the instrument. This is the end of my presentation. I'm aware there is a lot of material and a lot of content, and this was a very high level and broad overview. So I'm happy to reply to any questions, either now in the Q&A or as a follow-up through my email. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Cecilia, for that brief overview of the methods, of the relevance of data. As you mentioned, there's really a lot to discuss there, but due to time constraints, we could only keep it as short as this. Importantly, you highlighted also the evolving landscape when it comes to time use data collection methods and the guidelines that are being revised by this expert group, and the efforts to develop the minimum harmonized instrument, as well as the operationalization of the classification, the ICATUS 2016. So all of these efforts are obviously moving us towards developing a more sustainable model to institutionalize systematic data collection, which, as we know, is currently not taking place in many countries, not just in our region, but across the world. So thanks again, Cecilia. Let me now invite our second speaker, Samantha Watson. She's labor statistician with the ILO Department of Statistics based in Geneva. Samantha works with national statistical offices and international agencies on the development of new tools and guidance to support the regular production of time use statistics by harnessing existing labor force survey infrastructure in countries. Samantha has previously worked in academia, and she retains a visiting researcher position at the University of Southampton. Samantha, she will talk to us about the latest developments in measurement of women's work in labor force surveys. So Samantha, over to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. So I believe I've shared my screen now. Is that correct?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. And you can hear me well?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, evening to everyone. In this session, I'm going to be very brief, but I'm going to just cover recent developments in international standard setting and measurement approaches that are aimed at enhancing the visibility of women's work in labour statistics, but also enhancing the relevance of labour statistics for women's work. And this very short session is divided into 3 parts. So in the first part, I'm going to run through some important background on international standard setting and some of the key areas of alignment and harmonization. In the second part, I'll be discussing, excuse me, the different statistical sources which are important for the measurement of different forms of work, and I'll be explaining that term forms of work as well. In the third part, I'll present ongoing work at ILO to harness the LFS to better capture women's work, and in so doing, really to uncover and bring to light some of the gender-based differences and inequalities in the world of work more generally. So I'm going to just begin with a very brief overview of the standard setting process for international labour statistics. So some of you might already be familiar with the process, and some of you might have participated. For anyone who's not familiar, the International Conference of Labour Statisticians, or ICLS, is the key mechanism for global standard setting in labour statistics. And as you see here, it happens every 5 years. And it brings together statisticians and other experts from government, usually NSOs and ministries of labour, together with representatives from workers and employers organisations. And so the ILO hosts the ICLS every 5 years and also acts as the secretariat. So over the last 2 decades of ICLS especially, there's been a lot of steady progress to enhance the visibility of work that's disproportionately performed by women and girls. So for our purposes today, we're going to be taking a closer look at the implications of the 19th ICLS, which was held in 2013. So a major innovation of the 19th ICLS is the introduction of a reference definition of work. And work's defined as any activity performed by persons of any sex and age to produce goods or to provide services for use by others or for own use. And then, as you can see here, this reference definition provides the basis for the measurement of 5 distinct, mutually exclusive subsets of work, which we call forms of work. And these are namely own use production work, so of services and of goods, employment, which has been narrowed under the 19th ICLS in comparison to previous ICLS standards. Now it only encompasses work for pay or for profit. Unpaid trainee work, other forms of unpaid work, which includes things like court-mandated unpaid work, and then volunteer work, which, like own use production work, is subdivided into various different activities. And so if we look a little bit more closely at the 5 forms of work, you'll see that what unites them is their productivity. They're all productive activities. And what distinguishes them is their relationship to 2 key aspects. The first is the destination of the product, so whether it's for own final use or for use by others. And here, own final use, importantly, refers to use by self, use by one's household, or family members resident elsewhere. So it's a different conception of the statistical unit of the household that we're sometimes much more familiar with. And the second aspect is remuneration. So whether the work is unpaid, so in the case of own use production work, of services or goods, or volunteer work, unpaid trainee work, and things like court mandated work, or whether it's performed in expectation of pay or profit, which, as I said, is this narrower concept of employment. So I think it's probably clear that we can't fully conceptualize forms of work framework without reference to the SNA, the System of National Accounts, to which it's aligned and has been aligned from the beginning, from 2013 when it was launched. And the SNA, I'm sure you're all aware, it's the International Statistical and Accounting Framework. Among other things, it designates which activities are treated as economically productive. And of those, which are admissible to national estimates of GDP. You can see that we have the activities within the SNA, the System of National Accounts 2008 production boundary, which is narrow to the production of goods at either side of this forms of work framework. It excludes own use production work for services and volunteer work producing services. We also have the wider boundary, which is the general production boundary. And Cecilia already mentioned the ICITUS 16. So I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but just to say that it's also very important that the forms of work framework is aligned with the ICITUS 16. And this, when ICITUS 16 came out, it really did mark a really important advance in international standards for time use measurement. And statistics on time use and own use provision of services work, they really are to a large extent inseparable. And that's because time use statistics are really the default for producing statistics on own use provision of services. You can see in ICITUS, own use provision of services corresponds to codes 3 and 4, unpaid domestic services for household and family members, and unpaid caregiving services. So just moving very quickly to the data sources, LFS are the primary source for labour force statistics, and that's worldwide. And in recent years, we've seen a really big uptick in the number of countries that field their LFS on a continuous basis, as well as the number of countries undertaking quarterly or annual LFS. And we've also seen increased international harmonisation as countries align to the ICLS standards. And then just very briefly turning to the uptake of time use surveys. So this map is collated by UNSD and it shows the geography of time use measurements. The takeaway is that time use surveys aren't yet established as routine, as we've already heard. Only a few mainly high-income countries have integrated time use measurement into their national statistical systems. Measurement of own use provision work via LFS, it's still a really nascent project, and the chart here shows results for Vietnam. Vietnam recently included a series of questions on time use in their latest LFS. You can see that women spent close to double the time on own use provision of services than men did during the reference periods. And within that broad classification, we see further gender-based task distribution, with women disproportionately performing activities related to routine housework, there on the far left, and to childcare, which is on the far right. So it's just one slide. So currently, we're just developing a series of light or simplified time use modules that can be integrated into LFS to support production of own use provision of services work. And that's only really for settings where a dedicated time use survey isn't feasible, and Cecilia explained the differences earlier. And so the goal of this project is to enable countries to use their existing labour force infrastructure to establish a regular programme of time use measurement. And the project outputs, to the left there, they include time use modules, guidelines and toolkits, and are planned for release early next year. So I'll leave it there. If anyone has any questions, they can contact me directly, or we can discuss at the end of the session.
So thank you very much, Cecilia, for those very useful insights, particularly highlighting highlighting the modular approach by leveraging the labor force surveys in general to meet the demands for more accurate, timely, and cost-effective statistics related to unpaid care work. So thanks again, Samantha. And we will now move to our third speaker, Mr. Mashood Alam. Mr. Mashood is the Director of Demography Health Wing at the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. He's been with the Bureau of Statistics since 1999 with vast experience in gender statistics as well as in supporting surveys and censuses. He recently worked in collaboration with UN Women Bangladesh office to conduct a national time use survey actually in the first quarter of this year. So he's going to talk to us about a topic which is perhaps on everyone's mind, that is, how do you keep survey operations moving during COVID-19? So he's going to share with us Bangladesh's experience on collecting time use data during COVID-19. So over to you, Mr. Mashood, and you have 7 minutes for the presentation. Thank you.
At the very outset, I would like to convey my gratitude to the organizer of Asia-Pacific Stats Café Series. I am really very happy and feel proud to be here to share our experience of Timeuse Survey 2021. Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics has conducted the Timeuse Survey in 2021 with technical and financial support from UN Women. And it is the first time standalone national survey conducting during the COVID-19 situations. Also, Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics has conducted a pilot Timeuse survey in 2012. The main objectives of this survey is to increase visibility of unpaid domestic and care work through better statistics on their contribution to the economy. And the other objectives are to profile the distribution of paid and unpaid work as a means to identify policy and program implications from gender perspectives, and also to monitor the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the indicator 5.4.1. And sampling method, so we have used two-stage stratified sampling design. In the first stage, we have selected 500 primary sampling units, PSUs, following the PPS method. And in the second stage, we have selected 16 households from each PSUs by using systematic random sampling method. Our field data collection was done during 24 January to 12 April 2021. That is near about 80 days needed for the data collection. And before the data collection, we arranged a training program of enumerators and supervisors at the headquarters of BBS. All enumerators and supervisors were came to the headquarters, and we gave them the training, which was the uniform training. And separate training program was arranged for the editors and coders on ECA2s, because the other team was arranged for this editing and coding activities. And the field individual information was collected from all the 15+ years aged male and female households members from each selected households. Our target population was 15+ male and female from each household, selected households. And we followed the 24 hours recall method for the data collection issues. So full time diary use method we used. And our data collection was made by the team approaches. We have 8 divisions in our country, so we formed 8 teams. In each team comprises 5 enumerators and a supervisor. And each enumerator was assigned 3 households for the data collection per day. And for the time diary, 3 main activities of the respondent were recorded for each 30 minutes. And enumerators visited each household 3 times if needed. And first time, so maybe one person was missed, so second visit was done. And if the another person is missed, and the third times also they visited the households. And field operations. So during COVID-19, so we followed strict health measures during the orientation sessions as well as field operations. A team of senior officials of BBS were engaged to check health status of each team deployed all over the countries. So we maintain the regular follow-up with the data collection teams, which helped us to understand the field scenario. So only in one cases, one enumerator was taken back as the person was not feeling well in this COVID situation. So we immediately replaced with another data collectors to continue field operation as we had the reserved data collectors. And as well, BBS field officers also were mobilized to follow up with the data collectors, and support along with the transport and accommodation was provided by the field officers as required. And I mentioned that our enumerators were assigned 3 households per day instead of 4 households because for the COVID situation. So we changed a method. Normally we assign 4 households for the data collection for each enumerators. But in this case, we just changed this strategy. And each 15 years, we collected the field-in questionnaire from the field to complete the editing and coding activities, because to complete the simultaneously field data collection as well as the editing and coding activities. And each team provided with adequate masks and sanitizers to keep them safe during the data collection. And not only the data collectors, also the data providers were provided masks during the interview, because to keep safe from the COVID-19. And the data collection required face-to-face interaction with the respondent. So BBS took a strategy to take interview in open places, and no one except the interviewer and interviewee was allowed during the interview sessions. Each data enumerators were given adequate health and safety information to keep them safe, as well as the interviews also keep the safe. And we maintained the reasonable physical distance and for each interview as instructed by us and the field supervisors. And our local representatives supported our enumerators also in motivating the households to provide data. So here the lesson learned. So it was actually challenging to conduct the Timeuse survey in such difficult situation like COVID-19, and to keep the field enumerators and supervisors safe from the infections. We ensured appropriate health measures, transportations, accommodations with standard protocol. In the remote area, this transportation accommodation support helped us and was very useful. And so we can successfully completed the data collection by this support. And we maintained a regular follow-up with the data collection teams from the headquarters, which was extremely useful to understand their health and safety condition, as well as the flow of quality data collection in their field. We had 8 persons. We assigned 8 persons for each teams, and this person regularly maintained the follow-up with phone call as well as the physical visit. So we can understand their health conditions, as well as if they misunderstood any questions, we can suggest them for the correction. And we took the we kept reserved data collectors in case there was any need to withdraw enumerators from the field due to sickness. However, there was only one incident occurred, and we managed this issue instantly. So smoothly we could able to data collection safely. And sometimes access to some households in city corporation areas was challenging. So we took the interventions of our local public representatives and as well as BBS headquarters. So they solved the issues and we smoothly collect the data in these households because it's due to the COVID situation.
Mr. Mashood, could you kindly wrap up?
Yes, just one slide. So our future plan is in December 2021, we are going to publish a preliminary report, and our another plan is we shall produce a satellite account by using Timeuse Survey 2021 data, and in this regard, unpaid domestic work and care work will be assessed following ICATUS 2016. So this is our future plan, and thank you so much for my hearing. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Mr. Mashood, for those useful insights. It's really impressive to see that Bangladesh was able to pull off the survey even during COVID-19 and all the challenges that you faced. Of course, it required there were additional demands placed on the preparations, on the precautions you had to take on the field, but I believe it was all well worth the effort because you were able to collect the data without disruptions. So thank you for sharing your experience and lessons learned. So in the interest of time, I would now suggest that we move straight to part 2 of the Stats Cafe, which will discuss the analysis and the use of Timeuse data. And I would like to invite our first speaker for part 2. That's the Deputy, Ms. Pan Suhua, the Deputy Director of Social Division at the Department of Social Science and Technology and Cultural Statistics at the National Bureau of Statistics of China. She was the key person responsible for the implementation and analysis of the 2018 round of the China Timeuse survey. And previously, she had participated in an ESCAP-led project to conduct analysis of Timeuse patterns and the role of bargaining power to enhance understanding of household dynamics and factors impeding women's labor market participation in China. So Ms. Pan will now actually present to us this study and the findings of this study to demonstrate the policy uses of Timeuse data. So Ms. Pan, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Are you on mute? Please open your microphone.
Wait, hello?
Hello, yes,
Yes,
we can hear
you
you now.
Please go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, hello, sorry. Okay.
We don't see
I'm
your
glad
slide.
to.
All right, that's
I
fine.
will
Please
see
go.
my- Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to share our Timeuse survey findings. So far, we conducted twice Timeuse survey in China, separately in 2008 and 2018. Today, I will introduce the analysis of 2008. The title of my speech is Bargaining Power and the Household Division of Labor. first context, equality between men and women is a development goal in China. Now more girls are enrolling in school and more women are working leadership positions. At the same time, it raises the question of whether access to earning increases women's bargaining power and increases their ability to negotiate for more favorable household results. Through the Timeuse data, we can see so much differences between men and women. We want to explain what influenced the division of labor. It makes the analysis of time-use patterns very important. So we use a sample of couples, examine the relationship between bargaining power and the time allocated. Next is a survey description and sample. Our study focused on a sample of over 13 couples. The survey involved over 16,000 households and was administered in 10 provinces. All household members between 15 and 74 years old completed a 24-hour time diary, and each individual also completed a personal questionnaire. And this table presents descriptive data of the couples. We can find husband's education is higher than wife, and so that monthly wage. Compared to their husbands, a greater proportion of wives are unemployed. And from this table, we can see wives engage in labor market activities to a lesser extent than husbands, both in participation rate and the average time span. Wives engage in household and care work to a big extent than the husband. Here is our model. We use the SUR approach to analyze the amount of time that a person allocated to performing each main activity. The activity categories are aggregated into three main types. J equal 1, 2, 3, respectively respecting marketing work, household work, and non-work. The X1 refers to the main variable, bargaining power proxy, and the X2 represents the set of control variables. And we know bargaining power is fundamentally unobservable, so we consider two alternative proxies for bargaining power. And in Model 1, bargaining power is proxied by hourly wage and a dummy indicating whether the person earns a higher wage than the spouse. And in Model 2, bargaining power is proxied by the education gap and age gap between spouses. And education gap squared and age squared is included. This table is the result of time spent. And for both wives and husbands, having higher wage earnings is associated with more time spent on housework and less time spent on market work. As expected, the age gap proxy positively impacts husband's market work time and wife's household work time. The education gap bargaining proxy for husbands indicates less household work and more market work time. However, the education gap doesn't seem to have an effect on women. This table presents results with the share of couples work. Focusing on Model 2, the results indicate that a greater age gap leads to an increase in husband and wife's share of household work. A larger education gap results in the husband's smaller share of household work. However, the effect on wife's share almost negative and very small. It's the key result to time use patterns. The findings show that wives spend on average about 120 minutes more than their husbands in household and care work. Overall, wives spend more time on total work than their husbands. This result implies that wives have less time available for socialization, leisure, and personal care. And having young children increases the time spent in housework for both spouses, but the wife's housework increases more than their husband. While the presence of elder person in the household has no significant impact on husband's time use, it significantly increases the wife's time spent on housework and increases their time spent on market work. Here is our insightful policy recommendations. In China, now we implement the three-child policy. The heavy care work burden faced by families is becoming urgent. One way to address this problem is by providing of affordable child care and early childhood development programs and support for after-school care programs. It can also provide incentives such as paid parental leave and family-friendly labor practices that encourage men to take on household work. It's also a good idea to provide cash transfers in the form of child or older person support grants, tax exemption, and social insurance programs, especially among low-income households. In June this year, the city of Panzhihua in Sichuan province decided to 500 yuan every month per child to the families who have a second child or more until the child is 3 years old. I think it's a good policy. We hope to see more policies to ease the burden on families and promote gender equality in the future. Okay, my speech is over. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Pan, for that very interesting research study demonstrating the use of the 2008 China Timeuse survey to examine the relationship between intra-household dynamics and how that in turn impacts how couples allocate time to market work, housework, and care work. And obviously, studies such as these are becoming even more relevant now in the COVID-19 situation, where a lot of people are, of course, working from home, and they are simultaneously conducting market work as well as care work and housework. So Ms. Pan also highlighted some very interesting policy recommendations that emerged from the study that they did on childcare programs, parental leave, as well as social protection, all of which are very relevant to the 2030 agenda. So thank you once again, Ms. Pan. And let me move now to the last speaker, Ms. Butsara Sangaroon. She is the Director of Social Statistics and Analysis Section at the Statistical Forecasting Division of the Thailand National Statistical Office. Ms. Butsara has been with the NSO for over 20 years in various roles covering labor, poverty, education, health, and gender statistics. And just like Ms. Pan from China, Ms. Butsara had also participated a couple of years ago in an ESCAP-led project to analyze Thailand's 2009 National Timeuse Survey merged with the 2009 Labor Force Survey. And in her study, she examined work-life balance, including the determinants of unpaid work, market work, and leisure time among married individuals in the age group of 25 to 60 years. So thank you for joining us, Ms. Butsara, and over to you.
Thank you, Charita. Greeting from Thailand. My name is Butsara. I'm senior statistician from Thailand in ESO. Thank you for having me today to present the work-life balance and time use lesson learned from Thailand. I'm going to present the backgrounds because of the background of this paper, because of the proportion of women performing market work in Thailand during the past decades has increased remarkable. This study analyzed intra-household time allocation of prime-age husband and wife using the 2009 Timeuse and Labor Force Survey from Thailand. The analysis focuses on interrelation on their time allocation in formal activities, market work, unpaid domestic and care work, leisure and personal care. The research question, we want to address the gap by answering the three questions. Does husband monthly wage affect wife's time in unpaid domestic and care work? Does wife monthly wage have an effect on husband time in unpaid domestic and care work? And what determines the amount of leisure time spent by women and men? So the analysis make use of the combined 2009 average and Timeuse data sets. We can do that because the board survey we collect the same periods and from the NSO from July and to September 2009. The sample I want to give a briefly of the survey background. The sample in the LFS was selected using the stratified two-stage sampling method, while the TUS follow a stratified three-sampling method. In the first stage, we got 2,000 enumerated area were randomly chosen. In the stage 2 of both LFS and TUS, about 80,000 households in total were selected from municipal and non-municipal areas. In the third stage, one household member who was at least 10 years was chosen to be interviewed for the time used for each household. Using simple random sampling, the chosen respondent was interviewed for time use after his or her LFS interview was completed on the same day. both data and then from the time use, we have a 24-hour time diary for both weekday or weekend day in 10-minute slot. Both data sets have identical household identification number, so that we can use the household identification number variables. For example, regions, province, district, sub-district, area to household number. But before we do the analysis, we found that we cannot use household ID number from both survey to match as a sampling survey design planning, because they will have unmatched household ID number between two data sets due to errors coming up from the filling the questionnaires, and then the additional variable were added in order to gauge as much as number of individual from the mergings. So for the study, we got the combined 2009 FS and TUS, as you see the other screens. But for the study, we focus only 12,000 married individuals between 25 to 60 years old were interviewed, and were interviewed for the time used during a typical day. The advantage of combining the FFS and TUS dataset, they provide more comprehensive information. It's very clear from FFS and TUS. They provide more comprehensive information on the country labor force employment and earning that they could not capture alone. The merged datasets include not only work-related statistics, but also amount of time that the respondent spent on a variety of economic and non-economic activity in the formal and formal sector throughout a day. But the limited of the study due to the poor collection of the secondary activity, time analysis focused on primary activity only. This is a limitation of the study, as an individual who find it difficult to attain a healthy work-life balance are likely to prone multitasking. For the key result pertaining of time use patterns, this table presents the time use pattern of women and men in primary activity. We can see that participating women on the household and care work is double compared to men's. So this is can show that Thailand has facing the burdens of quality of life of women. And for the key result, the next using the SUR analysis. In the analysis, we examine the factor influencing the time spent in labor market activity, domestic and care works, and social and leisure activity. The regression estimate for household work and market work by gender and rural-urban area respectively. The study finding confirmed that Thai women bear primary responsibility for domestic and care work. In addition to their labor market, they also show their increase in men times in market work, and their hourly wage encourage their wives, especially those in rural area, to allocate more time towards housework, care work, and market work. So for the finding of the study have the implication of employment and social policy. The unequal division of household and care tasks increase the challenge for women to allocate time appropriate amount of time for leisure and personal care. So it also can result in the decline of women's physical and mental being and increase constraint to their labor market participation and career prospect, thus leading to their increased financial independence exposed to economic vulnerability. So when to link to the SDG, you can see that the link to goals 5, 8, and also 11, 10, and 11. So the policy recommendation can be like parent leave laws in both formal and informal sector, reducing gender wage gaps, and expanding the inclusive of child care subsidized programs, and also thank you very much for the attentions, and I would like to over to Charita.
Thank you very much, Butsara, for demonstrating how time-use data could be used in combination with data from other sources. In this case, you use the LFS survey, the labor force survey, for a more robust analysis of critical policy issues. So you also had some very interesting policy recommendations that emerged from your study, very similar to China, and which could be clearly linked to the SDGs. And I think one thing that is particularly impressive, as from what I know from your study, is that the lessons that were learned from this study with regard to data gaps that they observed from the 2009 survey were later incorporated to refine the methodology for the 2014 survey. So that is the slide that you are seeing right now on the screen. So thank you very much, Ms. Butsara. So I think that's, we have now come to the end of all our presentations, and you are invited to put your questions into the chat box at this point in time. I see some hands were raised, but you're requested to kindly type in your question in the chat box. I think there is already one question for Mr. Mashood from Bangladesh. And Kun Butsara, could you kindly stop sharing your screen? Thank you. So, Mr. Mashood, this question is for you. COVID-19 is likely to have changed time use patterns in a big way. Do you expect difficulties in interpreting the survey results because of this?
Thank you, Sarita. Yes, there was some impact on the regular activities in these COVID situations. Especially the main impact was on the school was closed. So the baby going to the schools and the mother's activity, carrying baby for the school's readiness. So it was not captured in this survey. You know, our survey duration, data collection duration was 24 January to 12 April. So especially in the rural area of our country, the regular economic activities were ongoing in this situation, but there was a small impact on the urban area. And you know, in our country, April, the lockdown was started in the last part of the March, especially in the April. So our data collection period were till 12 April. So the last part of this survey was a little bit under the lockdown situation. But the rest of this time, so the regular economic activities were somehow going on. So there was not a big impact on this regular economic activities, especially in the domestic and care work. It was going on in the households level, but some additional works was assigned to the domestic activity as there was the COVID situation. Most of the time they were remaining in the households. So we faces a little bit these changes in these regular activities, but now we are preparing our report. So after prepared the report, we can find out what is the situations in this survey results. We can find out which activities was more and which activities was less in these COVID situations. So Sarita, this is my answer. So this was we faced in this COVID-19 situation of our survey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Alam, for highlighting one of the most important points here is that the nature of activities and the type of activities has changed because of COVID-19. So school-going children are not going to school any longer, which means care work at the household level is changing. And so because of that, now usually when we do time use data collection, we do have to account for differences in activities conducted on weekdays vis-a-vis weekends, as well as activities that are conducted. Activities can also have a seasonal nature. Different seasons might have different activities. At the same time, if people are ill or there are certain other special circumstances, certain activities for those individuals can slow down. So COVID is again one of those special situations where there will be a change in the type of activities that people conduct. So perhaps your activity listing and your classification has to be adjusted in accordance with that. Participants and colleagues, you're invited to type in any questions that you have in the chat box. And while we're waiting for further questions, maybe I have one question for Cecilia. Cecilia talked about different survey methods, approaches, and I would like to ask Cecilia, and perhaps this is a question in the minds of many participants, diary-based approaches have often been considered the gold standard. They've been considered the ideal data collection approach for time use. But given that these can be quite resource intensive, how much of a compromise would it be in terms of data quality as well as granularity of information if countries were to adopt the hybrid? You did talk about the hybrid approach where, say, you can combine the time diary with stylized questions. So how much of a compromise would it be if countries did not adopt the full diary-based approach, but went in for something like a hybrid approach, or even just stylized retrospective questions on time-use data collection? So over to you.
Thank you so much, Sharita. Yes, it's a very good question, and I had a slide I didn't present for the sake of time. So there is no easy answer, in the sense that there are a set of considerations that we need to take into account when answering this question. It's not a yes, a yes or no, or a white or black answer. We need to take into account how easy it is to conduct a time-use survey, and usually stylized retrospective questions are fairly efficient and quite easy to frame and administered. And also a light time-use diary is expected to have less respondent burden in comparison to a full time-use diary. However, when we look at the data uses and the data utility of a time-use survey, the full time-use diary is expected to be the golden standard in the sense that can serve a different variety of policies. Data can be used for satellite account of household production, and also the design of the full time-use diary allows the measurement of simultaneous activities, which is a fairly important feature design for instance, measuring more accurately supervisory care and secondary activities. And this is a useful dimension for analyzing the data. In terms of data quality, as I mentioned in my presentation, stylized questions usually suffer from non-sampling error, and light time-use diary have been shown to slightly underestimate, about 20 minutes, the time spent on unpaid domestic care work. Obviously, there is a resource constraint in the sense that a full-time use diary is more expensive to administer and to process because there is a post-coding activity and process that is quite time-consuming, and obviously there must be some trained coders that need to process the code, the data, and code them. So, I would say that the most important aspect of all this consideration would be the data uses. For why do we run a time survey in a country? And I think it's extremely important that a user-producer dialogue is put in place at the beginning of the statistical process to identify the data needs. And that user-producer dialogue doesn't have to be involving only the Ministry of Women or Gender Equality, but for instance, could involve the Ministry of Economy or Labor or Transport or Infrastructure, and even, for instance, Culture. Because as we said, time-use data can really serve a wide variety of purposes. Thank you.
Thanks, Cecilia. So Cecilia basically pointed out to us that the choice of, there are so many options when it comes to data collection approaches and methods, but the choice of the method and the choice of the approach would, to a large extent, depend on the objectives of the data collection exercises and how the data will be used. So having the dialogue with users even before you embark on data collection becomes very critical in the choice of the method. So at this point in time, I do not see any further questions in the chat box. I think we've exhausted the questions there. So let me now turn the floor to Petra Namias, Chief of the Population and Social Statistics section at the ESCAP Statistics Division. She will wrap up this Stats Cafe with some final reflections and key takeaway messages. Over to you, Petra.
Yeah, thank you, Sharita. I'll try to do this quickly because we're over time. I think we were overly optimistic and probably a little greedy given how much interesting work there was to cover. I'll just start quickly, though, with a question that was sent ahead of time, which was actually to us at ESCAP, and it was from Tite at ILO, who was asking what ESCAP is doing to support countries in time use statistics. I think we don't actually really lead in this work, and it's not a big program for us, but there's two main areas I think where we do provide some support. First of all is the publication, which has just been released. So that has a lot of interesting material on country experiences, and we put a lot of effort into making sure that the scripts could be duplicated. So where the data are available, people can actually use the R scripts and status scripts and run their own analyses. So we hope this will be useful for countries and for researchers in general. The second is the gender e-training, gender statistics e-training, which we've been working on together with UN Women and our training institute, SIAT, as well as training of trainers. Now, this material should be shortly available. It's based on the UN Women curriculum, and it does have material based on time use statistics. So we hope that those two areas will be of use to supporting countries, and we're interested if there's any other work that we could support on. So to go back to a quick wrap up of our Stats Cafe, I think the presenters have first shown just how important time use statistics are for development, including for measurement of the SDGs. Many issues are touched upon with these statistics, such as child labour, informal work, domestic work, gender gaps, and so on. So this work is gender relevant, highlighting barriers to achieving gender equality due to the differences in use of time, especially domestic work and unpaid work, and the gender gap. And it's important to note that while a lot of the work is focused on lower middle income countries, this is also an issue in developed countries as well. So it's not solely an issue for developing countries, and it's a challenge everywhere to achieving full gender equality. It's very clear that these surveys are very resource intensive to do them well, and this just highlights the need for increased analysis and use of the existing data, as has been shown by some of our presenters, and also the need for comparability and harmonization was highlighted, and the excellent work of the expert group in moving towards that. And in that regard, Bangladesh was slightly an outlier in that they were showing some of the challenges with COVID-19, which was obviously not such an issue when we were writing or editing or the time use manual, but very important for being able to further use the data, understanding those constraints of COVID-19. And kudos to Bangladesh for such excellent work under such heavy constraints. China showed us that was a very good example of analysis of existing time use data, and they really managed to connect it with clear policy recommendations for supporting women, which is excellent. And Thailand showed us the power of integrating data sets by using the labour force surveys and the time use survey, and bringing those two together to show how the domestic burden continues to fall on women, even when they work outside of the house. And this is something which we are very keen to do more of, which is getting the maximum out of the existing data by bringing together data sets. So that was a very good example. So I think all that remains then is for me to thank all the presenters for their excellent presentations. And Sharita, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, for those reflections, Petra. So once again, from me, thank you to all our presenters. Thank you for our participants. And I really hope you have not only gained knowledge from this session, but you're also inspired to step up both production and the use of time use data sets in your countries. So until next time, thank you, bye-bye, and stay safe.